Good morning. For those that I have not met personally, my name is Pat Haynes, and I'm the Executive Vice President and Chief Benefits Officer. Like Linda, I'm live from Philadelphia. I've never had the opportunity to say that before. And I want to add my personal welcome and gratitude for your presence today. I'm grateful to Frank for providing a rich context, actually, for some of my observations about the impact of this unprecedented chapter in our plan's history. That context, as he suggested, does include uncertainty that at times, at least for me, honestly has felt and continues to feel bigger than life. But it also includes opportunity, which to me implies a kind of hopefulness, a way forward. No matter what it looks like on the other side of this, normal is going to be different. But different can be good, right? It can indeed be better, particularly if it's colored, it seems to me, by the value of important lessons that we learn along the journey. I suspect that we will be talking about the impact of COVID-19 for years, on, among other things, of course, global markets, employment patterns, education practices, national and international resource allocation, technology, the development of technology, unbelievable, and certainly on healthcare. Actuaries have already been debating about decreasing and rebounding trends, changing mortality assumptions and the like. You know, all that fun stuff. But it would appear that there are some absolutes and some anecdotes that can be combined to paint a picture of sorts. There's no question that across all industries, all populations, medical trends are down. In some cases, way down. Typically, trend is a function of both increases in the unit cost of services as well as increases in the amount or number of services that are consumed. During my 40-year career in healthcare benefits, it has been a rare experience to see a universal decrease in trend. Milliman, who actually serves as the board's medical plan actuary, puts the overall decrease in trend for 2020 at anywhere from 2% to 33%. And that's across the country, across all industries. But this has been driven almost entirely by a significant decrease in the use of services, not in the unit cost of services. Anecdotally, all providers across the country have reported anywhere from a 30 to 70% reduction in the use of medical services. And this is during the months of March and April as compared to the same period last year. You may have heard this reported out through various channels as a notion of deferred care, but it's actually it's about more than just deferring care. Just consider a few things. Outside of COVID-19 related conditions, there has simply been less demand for services. Less mobility, driven by shelter-at-home policies, actually has changed some of the historical accident and injury patterns, particularly in densely populated urban areas. Pure and simple, people are generally safer at home. You may, for example, have personally experienced a reduction in the cost of your auto insurance. I have, and that is not based on my driving record. Less driving has meant lower risk and fewer accidents across the country. Exposure to other kinds of infectious conditions is also more limited. For those of you with children not currently in daycare or school, I'm sure that you've observed that there are fewer strep throats, fewer colds, and fewer ear infections. Overall, demand has simply been less. But add to less demand a pattern of skipping or postponing care. A Kaiser Health Foundation poll revealed that almost 50% of Americans either skipped or postponed some kind of care during the months of March and April specifically. But many who responded to that poll actually said that there was no imminent health threat caused by that decision. But I suppose that we'll never really know the long-term impact of health consequences of someone opting not to receive care at a time when they otherwise would. While there's been some rebound, and that's reported again across the country, particularly with regard to accessing in-person care in ambulatory settings, we are not nearly back to pre-COVID-19 levels. But what did emerge as increases in patterns of utilization across the country were the use of telemedicine services and the demand for behavioral health services. Virtual medicine quickly became the norm for more routine care, and that was led by changing Medicare policies, providing broader flexibility to our older population. And our own statistics bear this out, which I'll share more specifically in a minute. But as for behavioral health needs, all statistics point to significant increases in trouble with eating and sleeping, a higher prevalence of headaches and stomach aches, all indicators of additional stress. The extra challenge for many of losing their social support systems, to say nothing of jobs, which in some cases is the social support system, has resulted in higher reported rates of depression and anxiety. Telephonic mental health providers report that callers have flooded their lines to talk about health fears, job losses, relationship strains, and most of all, loneliness. The emotional toll of this pandemic has simply been enormous. So, what have we seen and how have we responded? First, I hope you'll give me a moment of personal privilege to just indulge a little bit in a celebration of our organization's extreme agility and flexibility. We, like many of you, had to transform our work environment from 100% in-person, in-office operation to 100% virtual, and literally overnight. But more importantly, at precisely the same time, we were called to quickly respond to dynamically changing employment and benefit legislation and all the relevant supporting policies. And we had to make sure that our communications with all our stakeholders, you, our other employers, and our members as appropriate, that we had to make sure that those communications were clear and that they were timely. As many of you know, that extended to legislative initiatives that included the Paycheck Protection Program, or PPP, the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, and the CARES Act. Each of these were significant in their own right and required that we work closely with our general counsel as well as our business partners. Especially in the case of the CARES Act, we needed to work closely with Fidelity, our retirement savings plan investment and record keeper partner. But let's switch to medical for a minute. With specific regard to our medical plan, our COVID-19 related policy changes included a few things about which you're probably pretty familiar. So waiving all the cost sharing on COVID-19 related testing and treatment expenses, waiving co-payments on all telemedicine services, waiving some prescription drug prior authorization requirements, and permitting earlier refills for medications, extending EAP visits from 6 per issue to 10 per issue, and providing a grace period for completing dental work in the event of benefit termination. So of course, we've been monitoring on a regular basis the impact of COVID-19 on our plans and programs, at least in the aggregate. So let me share some of that with you now in the form of some statistics collected through the end of July. So our total covered population is approximately 27,500 active employees and family members. And if you think about that, these numbers, in a way, tell a story of some good fortune and perhaps just a little bit of privilege. So we had 1,726 individuals tested And remember, this is through July. I don't think the story has been told yet. That's about 6% of our total population. Of that number, we had 218 confirmed cases. That's less than 1% of our total population. Number of admissions were 24. Life-threatening cases, and this is an important statistic, of course, was 10. We did pay one death claim for an active member. Like all populations, I suspect that this hit our retired population higher. Of course, we don't have a lot of that medical data because their bills would have been handled first by Medicare. So we don't really have complete insight into the number of events, but I can share with you that we did have, relative to deaths, we had 14 death certificates that indicated cause of death as COVID-19. And that's probably against a population of more than 10,000 retirees. So what was the total claim cost for all of this? And this total claim cost of $1.2 million was for all COVID-19 related claim expenses, again, not from our retired population. And to put that into some context, that's less than 1% of our estimated annual spend of about $160 million. If you want to look at just the cost of confirmed cases, that cost was about $500,000. I think in some ways a more staggering statistic is around the use of telemedicine. These numbers include all virtual care, including things like physical therapy. People are even doing that virtually now. And non-EAP mental health visits, a very important part of virtual medicine now. So approximately 8,600 patients were responsible for 21,000 visits, again, through July, and that's just under 3 visits per patient. These services resulted in paid claims of approximately $1.9 million, or roughly $90 per visit. So again, not a huge impact on unit cost of services, but a total different way of using services. Our EAP utilization was up, but honestly, not as much as we would hope, given our understanding of what the likely need is out there. So we ask ourselves, what does all of this tell us about the future? Does it in any way inform what we do or how we do it? And what impact does it have on overall population health and related cost trends for our plan? I'm going to tell you, we'd be lying if we answered that question with anything other than we really don't know. But I do have a few thoughts. We need to continue to be sensitive about our plan's cost share responsibilities, requirements. And what do I mean by that? Deductibles, co-pays, and co-insurance. Because we want to make sure that our members, your employees, feel secure about the financial implications of accessing the right care at the right time and at the right place. And that includes telemedicine where appropriate and in-person care. We need to find more meaningful ways of integrating primary care with behavioral health. Primary care is often the gate to behavioral health care, and we need to be more intentional about how we integrate those two. We need to find more ways of lifting up the importance of self-care. Resistance to diseases of all kinds is improved by good sleep, good nutrition, exercise, and social connection. Yes, even if that's only through Zoom. In other words, we need to strengthen, as Frank suggested, our commitment to wholeness and well-being. And at least in 2021, we can do all of that in the context of relative financial stability. You will hear from my colleague, Keith Dickey, later today about some of the specific changes we're making in 2021, though many of these were contemplated in a pre-COVID-19 world. But I can tell you that our financial forecasts, which we formally update 3 times a year with Milliman, they tell a story of strength. Emerging results for 2020 suggest that, like other employer plans across the country, our trends are down, and that likely is the result of some kind of deferred care, again, reported across the country on all plans. But even with some conservative assumptions about a slow return to normalcy, 2021 projections include what I would suggest are modest cost increases, which have in fact been reflected in your renewals, many of which you've already seen. Our reserves remain at levels that give us confidence about our ability to continue to deliver a quality program at a fair and stable, most important, stable price. That's in part our promise. As purchasers, I hope that gives you some sense of well-being. We're so grateful for your business, your trust, your partnership, and of course your presence today. I'll look forward to the opportunity to respond to your questions along with Linda in a few minutes, and she'll be spending a bit of time on some trends we've seen specific to your business.
Thank you, Pat. It's great to hear your perspective and insights on the effects that the pandemic has had on the landscape of healthcare and the benefits specifically here at the board. As Pat said, I'm going to spend a few minutes on what we've seen and heard and listened in conversation with you and our other employers. Our philosophy of benefits is based on a concept that we live in caring community with one another. Frank spoke to the commitments you, our community, can count on. Pat just shared the board's more recent actions as a community-based benefits plan in response to the impact the pandemic is having on all of us. I'm going to turn our discussion now about community inward and share some observations and learnings that we've gained from all of you. So let me start with how we serve as context for this conversation. Today, the board serves almost 6,000 employers and 65,000 members across the country and in Puerto Rico. We do so with 15 plans and programs built on this concept of community. You see this at work in our income-sensitive deductible in the PPO, and in the ways gains and losses are shared across the medical plan to benefit the entire population. Effective stewardship is critical to how we serve all of you. As Pat mentioned, we maintain strong reserves. We leverage scale with our vendor partners to drive cost efficiencies, and we keep our administrative expenses low. Doing all of that ensures the continued investment in our plan design, program expansion, and cost stability. When making decisions, we ask ourselves what is the right thing to do, not just what is required or expedient. Our goal is to serve the church through serving more and serving better. Since 2017, we have our active members served has grown by more than 20%. And we have significantly improved or enhanced our program. Many of you on this call will remember when we added the EPO plan to our medical plan options, and just 2 years ago, our qualified high deductible health care plan. Several new income security benefits have been added and certainly will in 2020, a vision hardware benefit, and several assistance programs that your employees and members have taken advantage of. So I have to admit, this slide makes me and my colleagues smile. Many of you on the call are probably looking for your particular organization's logo. That's good. Keep looking. I'm sure you will find it up there. But we smile because we see your faces in these names. We see your colleagues whom we serve, and we remember where we met at your office and what your campuses look like across the country. And more importantly, we feel a deep sense of gratitude for the opportunity to contribute in some small way to your important missions when we look at this slide. It really is impactful for us. The board serves 234 affiliated employers today, and that's out of a total population of about 530 organizations that we have identified that are eligible to be in our plan. So let me share a little bit about your peer group, your fellow customers who are in the board's plan. First of all, you all cover the country very well. There is at least one affiliated employer in every state except 3. Hawaii, which by the way, I'm happy to visit a new branch location anytime, Rhode Island, and Vermont. Having said that, though, there are pockets, geographic pockets in the country where we see concentration of affiliated employers. And those states are Pennsylvania, here, North Carolina, Florida, and Texas. So they are the homes to some of the largest number of affiliated employers. And of course, you all come in all sizes, all right? Our largest client has more than 1,200 employees enrolled in our plan today. And of course, our smallest, and there are several of them, have just 1. Some of our relationships are decades old, while others only months old. Some have left the board in the past, but have since come back, and we say welcome home to those of you who've done that. Many elect to offer just a single benefit. Most often it's our medical plan, while others can offer 2, 3, or 4 of our benefits to their employees. And I'll admit lately we have seen new clients start with our retirement savings plan, our RSP plan, as their initial board benefit. While I've enumerated a long list of differences, here is what you all have in common with each other. You are called to serve others. Your missions may vary, but you are still caring for those in need, whomever they are and wherever they live. Your employees tend to see their work as sharing in that call, not just a job. We at the board understand both that institutional call as well as the personal one. So let's take a few minutes to look a bit deeper at 4 segments where we have the most activity and see opportunities to leverage common practices and priorities for the benefit of all. One of the calls to serve Presbyterians have long answered is to serve older adults. Our senior living and long-term care community clients include small, single facilities in a local community to multi-state, multi-site national organizations. They share common mission and have similar operating models, providing direct care to residents on a 24/7 basis, and that informs their HR practices and policies and priorities, as does high employee turnover and strong competition for talent in particular positions. Competitively structured, high-value benefits is and can be a differentiator, especially for certain high-demand roles. Flexibility in administration of waiting periods and reporting to management to manage enrollment decisions are essential, as well as, excuse me, as we all know, this group of employers have been very hard hit by the pandemic, affecting both staff and residents. As a result, EAP, behavioral health, and our call to health programs have been a lifeline for these essential workers. The second segment, which has a deep history with Presbyterians, is education, colleges, universities, K through 12, and of course, seminaries. While their missions vary slightly, primarily based on their student populations, they operate in very similar ways. Often a 9-month school year, relatively stable faculty ranks that are long tenured, and large campuses to maintain. Benefit options to meet the needs of tenured faculty, as well as new and younger workers is very important. While the pandemic has challenged the way this segment does business as they pivot to remote learning when and as needed, for instance, making virtual open enrollment support critical. Camps and conference centers have a long history of nurturing the spiritual and physical health of young Presbyterians and others. As someone who attended sleepaway camp for a couple of weeks every summer as I was growing up, I can personally attest to how they shape and mold lives. Their operating model is seasonal, of course, with summer their busiest season. Camps are highly dependent on part-time summer staff, mostly students, which has been a particular challenge this year with the pandemic. Conference centers more often offer year-round programming for both youth and adults, staffed with larger full-time staff. Network and telemedicine benefits are important considerations as most camps and conference centers are in relatively remote locations. And lastly, social service organizations, probably the most diverse group in terms of specific missions, but we found commonality with their business models and their use of benefits to attract, develop, and retain staff. Their size often determines the breadth and depth of benefits offered and the resources they have to support them. Having access to knowledgeable account managers here at the board has been critical to their ongoing support of their staffs and colleagues. Our toolkits and other information on pensions.org and tools help these HR professionals support their colleagues in the manner in which they want to. So we look at how you, our employers, make decisions every year through the employer agreement season. And given this context of how I've described our current customer base, I thought we'd share with you what decisions our customers overall made last year, about this time actually, for the 2020 year. So let's go through some data here. And again, this is for this year. First of all, it's interesting that 3/4 of you offer only one medical plan option, and it's our PPO. Now, we suspect that's probably for legacy reasons. PPO is our original medical plan option, and it's been in place for many years. It is also the most generous in terms of plan design and features. So for those employers where that generosity and that design was most important, it remains an important option for their employees. 62% of our employers today cover 100% of member-only cost of coverage. That is very common in terms of our portfolio and perhaps not as common in the industry overall. You will see here that 62% cover 100% of member only, and then another 18% cover from 75% and above. So that's fully 80% of the cost is covered on, or 80% of employers have covered at least 75% of the cost for member-only coverage. And finally, sort of the flip side of that, about 2/3 are covering less than 51% of family coverage. And what we are seeing here is really a focus on the part of you to make your dollars count and focus on your employees. And quite frankly, those tiers of coverage that are more important are getting less of your cost share dollars. So what have we learned? It's been a year since your last employer agreement, and we are in that season again now. As we have discussed, so much has happened and likely will affect the decisions that you will make over the next 2 months as you finalize your decisions for 2021. What have we learned from our conversations with you and your peers? What might we share to help you make the best decisions you can for your employers, your employees, and for your organization? Well, according to the registration survey that many of you responded to, about half of you indicated that you are somewhat or very likely to reduce your organization's cost of benefits. So what we see here is really that the cost and value of benefits are more important than ever. We know several of you are considering adding the EPO or the high deductible plan as a second and or third medical plan option for the first time, and by that creating a true buy-up with your PPO. Remember that by doing so, you have the opportunity to reduce your cost of benefits anywhere from 15 to 22% as the EPO and high deductible plan are less expensive than the PPO. And yet others will focus on promoting the features and benefits and programs already built into our benefits to ensure their employees are taking full advantage of what's currently available. Wellness needs of your employees have changed as the effects of the pandemic-related stress, both personally and professionally, take a toll. A number of our clients in senior living have shared their deepening concern for the mental and physical well-being of their staff. Burnout is significant as these caregivers are devoting all of their energy to others and not practicing adequate self-care. We have worked with these employers to leverage our EAP services more creatively and working with call to health challenges that might be tailored to their individual organizations. Actually, one employer is offering virtual meditation sessions for staff and another virtual yoga. So there is great energy and creativity on ways to help and be a resource to your employees. Uncertainty continues to dominate. So many questions, so many unknowns still. We have seen you be creative in solving for what you can, like schools and colleges pivoting to remote learning. As it relates to your benefits, many customers are focused on maintaining the status quo and deferring any low priority changes to benefits until next year. Admittedly, that's not an option for all. And in those cases, employers are very cautious and keeping any changes to the minimum required. I think the most important thing we've learned is that your missions are needed now more than ever. You are rising to the challenge and trying to keep doing more with less and less. You have our commitment to continue to help each of you unlock the full value of our benefits for you and your employees. As you heard from Pat, we will continue to enhance our benefits to address affordability, wholeness, and access. We are grateful for your trust and your partnership, and we look forward to working together going forward. Thank you. So let's take a few minutes for questions, and we have a couple that we have to start us off, and so I'm, Pat, gonna turn this over to you and see if you would answer this for the benefit of the audience.
Sure. So are some of the changes that I referenced to the medical plan likely to be permanent? Well, permanent is a funny word. I think we've learned that in the last couple months. And honestly, we're reviewing this on a regular basis, and it will be in some cases data-driven. It will be in some cases informed by good medical policy. And let me just take an example of that. So I covered, for example, that we've waived co-payments on COVID-19 related care. That actually was a legislated requirement, and it would normally expire after the president ended what is known as the national emergency. I think it is likely that we will minimally keep that in place until the end of the year. And I would suggest to you that we are very focused on making sure that access to care, doing the right thing at the right time at the right place, is not driven by financial implications. So that one is perhaps a little more obvious than some of the others we talked about. And I'll bring particular attention to the copay on telemedicine. We have waived any copayment on all telemedicine services. So you may recall that we have a Teladoc benefit that had a $10 copay, which is less than the $25 office primary care visit. Does it make sense to encourage the continued use of virtual care? I would say the answer to that is yes and no. Yes, absolutely, if it's an alternative to no care. No, probably if a patient should be seen by a physician. There's an awful lot of physician misses when they're not physically seeing the patient. I watched my husband go through a virtual well check at our kitchen counter, and I'm going to tell you that because he wasn't weighed, he took off a few pounds on what he reported as his weight. He did have a blood pressure cuff, and that enabled him to give the doctor an accurate reading. So I think if we were to encourage the continued use of telemedicine, we'd also want to make sure that patients had the right equipment in their homes so that they were able to legitimately share biometrics with their physicians. So that's a wait and see, but I think there is terrific merit in virtual medicine, and I particularly feel that way about behavioral health. So if access to behavioral health services is broader, deeper, richer as a result of telemedicine, I would be very much in favor of looking at copays that were less than what they might be otherwise. So all of this is a work in progress, and I think what I'd like to suggest, rather than talking about permanent, is flexible, adaptable, and reflective of the times and the needs of your employees. I hope that answers the question.
Great. Thanks, Pat. And let me take a moment just to remind everyone that if you have a question, please enter it into the questions box that we talked about earlier, and those questions will come to us, and time permitting, we'll be able to read them out loud for everyone's benefit and answer them live. And as I said earlier, if we don't have time today, we will make sure that we follow up and provide those answers. All right, so here's our next question. How can organizations reduce their benefits costs during this time? Well, I'll take that one and talk really about a couple of things, some of which I mentioned earlier in my comments. Through our benefit plan, you have multiple options around how to manage cost, both to you, the organization, as well as to your employees. So first and foremost, I would look at what medical options you offer. Are you part of that 74% of our clients who only offer the PPO? Well, then I would suggest that perhaps you look at our EPO and the high deductible plan as alternatives. Not instead of, but in addition to. So there are benefits to choice with that, but also there are opportunities to reduce your overall cost. Additionally, think in terms of those options that you are offering. Which one is your core benefit offering? And perhaps that's the EPO, and you position the PPO as your buy-up plan. But you've got that flexibility to decide how to manage those costs and expected enrollments. Our high deductible plan is qualified and can have an HSA attached to it. Depending on your situation and enrollments, sometimes employer contributions into an HSA that might incent higher enrollments is cost effective and actually reduces the employer's overall cost to offer benefits. After choice and options, I would look at cost share arrangements. How is that arrangement working today? Where do you make adjustments if you need to, and what's the value of those adjustments? Is it certain tiers? As you saw, you have benchmarking data now from us about who and which tiers, how other employers are sharing in the cost, whether it be family or member only. So looking at cost share adjustments, I think, is important. And also, to the extent that you have other benefits, voluntary benefits, and perhaps you as an employer contribute to them, maybe those are the benefits that you look at scaling back your contribution as they can be fully paid for by employees. Regardless of what options you consider, please talk with us. We would be happy to answer your questions and really partner with you in terms of determining which is the best set of solutions for you and your employees. Okay. All right, we have one more. Pat, how about this one? I'll look at this actually instead. So in 2021, we need to introduce employee cost share for the first time. Do you have any suggestions about how to do that successfully? This is a hard decision. I know that for some employers who are contributing 100% to the cost and their employees are not bearing any, breaking that and moving into some cost share arrangement is really hard. I would suggest that you look at a couple of things. First is some decisions that you need to make as an employer, I'd suggest. So how much do you need to share? What is the dollar amount that you're looking to manage? What tiers, what does your enrollment patterns look like? What does your employee base look like in terms of what tiers might be where you focus any particular cost share? What medical plan options do you focus in on? Is it the PPO or is it another one if that's what you're offering? Is this move towards some share in costs with your employees permanent? Is this the beginning of what you will continue to do in the future? Or is it temporary in response to, as we have said many times, these unprecedented times? Are you going to build up and make this a gradual increase in terms of cost share, or is it a percentage that you expect to have going forward? Once you make those decisions, then I think, and we have seen it successfully done, it's really a communication strategy. It's, sharing transparently with your employees what and why. What happens, if you didn't move forward in this direction. Share some of the data that we have shared with you today around what other employers are doing so that your employees can see how they are affected relative to others in similar situations. And the other piece is to think about the total rewards or total compensation that you are providing to employees, not just salary, not just benefits, but the entire package and what that is valued. And then there are ways that employees can take responsibility and soften the impact. Everything from participating in Call to Health to get the reduced deductible, only using in-network providers, and how they use the plan. Telemedicine versus an office visit where appropriate. Not avoiding the emergency room if it's not essential. And then lastly, perhaps you offer some voluntary benefits where it's no cost to you as the employer, but you're demonstrating access or providing access and demonstrating an interest in keeping your employees, having them have access to as many benefits as appropriate for their needs. I hope that answers the question. All right, one more.
Well, actually, I think we have two more because we did get another one in the queue. But let me try and address this one. What can we do to better support our staff right now? Many are feeling burnt out and worried about the future. I'd like to share with you that as a leader of our organization, I, along with Linda and our other leaders, we asked the same question. I think, first of all, it's really important to validate those feelings. I think worry is a whole new concept now and into the future. And I really think it's important to just allow people to own those feelings and validate them. When I talked about some of our good fortune in relative statistics, it occurs to me that grief is grief, loss is loss, and we are desperately sad that any life would be lost to this disease or frankly to anything. So I just really think it's important to lift up that this is a difficult time. Now, in terms of what we might be able to contribute in terms of programmatic support and help to you, I'd call out the EAP again. I would call out the promotion of virtual mental health services. More and more providers are providing services that way. And when you think about it, in a small community, it makes accessing that kind of care more anonymous, and perhaps it feels safer. I would encourage that focus on self-care. Enormously important to get a good night's sleep and eat well and get exercise. Don't be afraid to over-message around those things, because sometimes people just need to hear it again and again, and have you tell them it's okay. It's okay to feel bad, and it's okay to go take care of yourself. And so I would work with Catherine, work with Linda, let us help you message around that. But again, I'd urge that you just own it, allow your staff to own it, and then let us help you with the programs that we do have available to call out some of what individual employees can be doing for themselves and their families. The next question is a little bit more practical and technical, so I'll take it. And it's pretty clever. With the reduced claims, is there any chance of a rebate or return of premiums in 2020? I'll gulp. But just briefly, what we try to do when we set cost for you all is assure that we have, on an almost break-even basis, sufficient revenue to take care of claims and expenses. Now remember, we don't have to return any kind of profit to our organization. We don't have shareholders. And that's a really good thing, and it allows us to try and get as close as we can to expected expenses. But believe it or not, we're just not that smart to call it to the precise dollar. So while we see reducing trends in 2020, we're probably not going to know what 2020 really looks like until the end of the first quarter of 2021. 2021 end of first quarter will probably have most of the claims in and paid that actually were incurred in this year. So we'll know more then. And what I'd like to suggest is, rather than paying out some sort of nominal rebate, which frankly I don't even know if we would have it at this point, is that we're much more careful about setting prospective cost. So I think part of your experience and value with us has been around stability. And that comes, frankly, from having a large population. And so that we can take the hits, the large claim cost hits, and that kind of volatility without that translating into a dramatic increase in your specific rates. But I will tell you, we will be very sensitive and careful about setting prospective costs based on looking at as much history as possible. And I hope that answers the question. But I'm sure you'll let us know if it doesn't.
Great. All right. Well, I think those are the only questions we have at the moment. So I know we're running a little ahead of schedule, but I'm sure you won't mind having a slightly longer break. It might actually count as lunch now, as opposed to just looking at emails. We are going to convene back at 12:15 Eastern Standard Time. So we look forward to having you back with us. Thanks.